Hi, this is Dr. Michelle Robin with Small Changes, Big Shifts, Building Rhythm and Resilience. And I believe if you'll change one thing a month, one thing for the next 12 months, you'll change your life forever. Thanks for joining me on the journey. Well, hey, welcome to Small Changes, Big Shifts Wednesday Wisdom, or Wisdom Wednesdays, whichever way you want to look at it. Today, you are in for a real treat. If you happen to be in the Kansas City metro area, what a gorgeous day and gorgeous week we've had. My guest today is joining me from Boston, the East Coast, and has some firsthand experience dealing with the physicians that have been on the front lines with COVID-19. It is perfect because she has a book called Everyday Resilience. So when she reached out to me, we thought, well, that's perfect for the show. So thanks again for joining me on Small Changes, Big Shifts. We're building some rhythm so you can have resilience during this time. And as you're listening to the show, I'd encourage you, if you have questions or comments, please post those, and I'll be happy to share them with Dr. Gail, my guest. So she's a physician. She's a physician coach, speaker, author of many publications, once again, including her latest book, Everyday Resilience. Prior to becoming a physician coach, and at a critically stressful time in her career, she struggled with self-doubt. Can anybody relate to that? And over-tiredness. I guess we can relate to that as well. Today, we'll be discussing her own health journey and career journey, imposter syndrome, which I personally have experienced, and how to help you really have resilience during this COVID-19, especially for healthcare workers. So Dr. Gail, thanks for joining me on Small Changes, Big Shifts, Building Rhythm and Resilience.
Really a pleasure to be here, Michelle.
Awesome. So, hey, tell me a little about your story.
Okay, so let's see. For many years, I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. Let me start there. I read all these James Herriot books. I thought being out in the country and being a large animal vet would just be a fantastic thing. And then I worked on some dairy farms and got to see that it wasn't really so James Herriot-like, and that it was pretty gritty, and it was all about production, not about loving the animals. So I actually went on to go to medical school. I changed course, and I went to medical school, and I was really drawn to end-of-life care. It was really kind of a calling. So I worked as a hospice physician for most of my career, and I didn't really know why I was called to hospice work, but I was. So I did that. Then about 10 years ago, as we were learning more about this epidemic of physician burnout, a different epidemic than COVID, I decided to become a coach. So I trained and I became a coach expressly so I could work with fellow physicians and help them build their resilience to all the difficult situations that they face. Along the way, I became a certified mindfulness meditation teacher. I work at Harvard Medical School, and I'm just really privileged to coach colleagues across the land to help them manage, what's often the marathon of a career.
Veterinarian potential, hospice doctor, coach. It's so fascinating. I think about today's time, and I really think about like a waffle. And those of you following know I kind of have this little waffle analogy, and it came about during COVID. We had this, in my opinion, a mental health pandemic prior to COVID, and then we had COVID-19, and then we have the Black Lives Matter. We had physician burnout before COVID-19, and like you mentioned, you've been doing this 10 years, and then now we have the political system. Are we at a breaking point?
Well, I'm a cup half full kind of gal, so I hope we're not at a breaking point. And I think we've been at challenging times many times in the history, certainly of the United States and the globe, been in challenging times. And somehow we've gotten through them. We don't always know how, but we're a resilient species. We really are. And we're a resilient society in Western culture. So I'm hopeful, but how that's going to play out, the chapter hasn't been written yet, has it?
It hasn't. Well, it's been fascinating to look back 10 years from now and look at this time. And I want to get to the meat of our program, but I have a couple more questions before we do that as we think about how do we teach people some takeaways today where they can be more resilient. On this show, I like to focus on four words. Celebrate. We're celebrating you and your work. It's not been probably an easy work being in hospice and now being on the front lines, helping our physicians who are experiencing high burnout, once again, even prior to COVID. And then we want to give people guidance. What are some things they can do to be more resilient, to build rhythm through this time, and then connect them with some resources, possibly your lovely book, Everyday Resilience, and number 4, provide hope. I'm a cup half full person too, so I'm glad that you brought that in. Before we do that, I want to dive into hospice. And you're going to know the gal. There was a gal that traveled overseas as a singer, and she was a hospice nurse. This is a book or a story that came out a long time ago on Guardian, and she talked about the 5 lessons she learned from the dying. Do you remember that?
Sure, the 5 wishes of the dying.
Yeah, 5 wishes. Hey, do you have any of those off the top of your head?
I probably don't have all 5, but I'll tell you the take-home point is living true to who you are and stepping out of the shoulds. I should be this kind of person. I should work at this kind of job. That's the prime message that she had, that people, when they're dying, and I saw this over and over in my 20 years as a hospice physician, the regrets that people have. Why did I go on the straight and narrow? Why did I listen to, and get married to the person that they told me to get married to, that kind of thing? Why did I work myself to the bone when I could have really been true to my values? I could have spent more time with my family. I could have done the things that were so important to me in terms of my community. And that's the key. And that's really the key message with resilience, is how to be true to yourself, how to step out of all of these expectations that we all grow up with. These messages that we all hear about living in a certain way, acting in a certain way, buying in a certain way, that don't ring true to us. And resilience is about shedding a lot of that, really learning practical strategies so that you can really live by your own values and your own purpose with that head held high and that sense of authentic living.
When you say that word shedding to me, it makes me think about life like cleaning out your kitchen cupboards. You take everything out and you wipe down the cupboards, and then you put back in what serves you. Talk about some of your own shedding, because you've had a journey and helping physicians. But talk about your own shedding. What's something that most people don't know about you?
Okay. Well, if we're doing this deep dive, then I'll be honest. I grew up in a very difficult household, a pretty abusive household that actually looked fine on the outside. My parents were well educated. There's no alcohol or drugs. They held down reasonable jobs. And yet inside the house, it was very different. There was a lot of abuse. My parents were very wounded from things that had happened in their own lives, and they were not resilient. They hadn't learned how to be resilient. So it's been a journey of healing, frankly, from the abuse in my own childhood. I touch on this a little bit in the book as a source of inspiration for readers to kind of help people see what can be overcome. As a result of the abuse, like many children, I somehow believed it was my fault, that I was to blame for what was going on, when obviously we can look at that now and realize I wasn't to blame. My parents were wounded, troubled people, and they acted out destructive patterns on their daughter. So that's been a real process of shedding shame. Shame was really my narrative for a lot of years. I thought there was something deeply wrong with me, like the way I walked, the way I talked. Honestly, everything I did, I had the kind of this shame motif. It was horrible, really quite a weight. And I've had to kind of reclaim my own resilience and really actively shed this narrative that there was something wrong with me, and realize I was just a vulnerable child. There was a lot that was right about me. So you asked, and I'm telling, that's my biggest shedding story. We can all shed these inner narratives of unworthiness that somehow kind of get cast to us, almost like a part in a play. But we can shed them.
Reclaim. So to those of you that are listening to us live today, thank you. I would love to hear in the notes how you have reclaimed. For me, part of my journey, and our listeners know this, is the Hoffman process really helped me at the age of 31 when I was at that low point, growing up with drama and trauma like you, Dr. Gail. It helped me start to clean out my cupboards and start to remove some of the shame and some of the burdens I was carrying on, kind of like a martyr, actually, and let that go and I know people ask me, how am I more peaceful? I'm peaceful because I've done my work, and it sounds like you've done your work too. So kudos for doing your work and shedding some of those things that don't serve you. When you're working with physicians, especially with such a high rate of burnout, what do you think is the common theme?
It's interesting. On the one hand, physicians are so successful, in terms of societal views of what success is. They're smart, they've persevered through difficult training. They are in a good socioeconomic level. And yet it's really something, the narrative that physicians have, where they're typically their most harsh critic. It's really something. These people that we revere are, the doctors that I see and the doctors that I know, this incredibly bright, gifted, committed individuals, so caring and compassionate. And yet most physicians walk around with this storyline that they're not smart enough. They're not compassionate enough. They're not this enough. They're not that enough. Honestly, it's a fill in the blank, but it's this painful story. And we'll talk a little bit, I hope, about the imposter syndrome. You'd be amazed how many physicians walk around actually feeling like they're an imposter. Everybody else knows so much and that they don't. And it's only a matter of time until they'll be found out. And honestly, the burden that this is for physicians, it's a big factor in physician burnout. It's sort of the backstory in some ways. There are other things that contribute to burnout. The emphasis on perfectionism that we learn as physicians. If you're not perfect, you're a failure, which is just crazy. Nobody can be perfect. It's by definition an unattainable standard. And yet we as physicians hold ourselves up to it. And obviously we're not the only ones. I know that. But it's costly because then we undermine our own successes. We undermine our own sense of goodness and accomplishment and seeing, all that we're bringing to the patients that we serve that we should feel really good about. So we can talk about it more. It's really an interesting conundrum.
It's interesting. And one of the quotes that have kept me going the last 30 years as a practitioner, because as you said, it's never enough. You like, to be transparent, I had a patient, I'm not used to seeing her. I was covering for one of my partners. And so I wasn't even looking for her. And she was waiting on me yesterday. And I pride myself on not having people wait on me. And then she had to leave and I felt horrible about it. So it wasn't that all the people I helped that day, it was the one person who I let down because I just wasn't expecting, when you're not expecting somebody, you're not looking for them. And I'm a little bit ADD, maybe a little bit more than ADD. Probably most physicians are probably on this spectrum, a little ADD. Yeah. But there's a saying by Dr. James Parker, who's one of the chiropractic leaders. He since has passed on, but he said, don't let the negative few affect the positive many. And I think that's true in all of us, whether you're a physician, whether you're a mother at home thinking about what could you do different with your kids. We all have that enough syndrome. Will we be enough? Once again, we're celebrating you. And I just am really enjoying your energy and your vibration. I just want to come clean on that. I'm kind of a big vibe nerd, and I love how peaceful you seem. And so I want to acknowledge that you've done your work, and that ripple is. I'm sure the people around you would say that I can feel it through this conversation that we're having today. So I want to recognize that in you. So I'm celebrating you.
Thank you. That's the most validating thing I can imagine somebody saying to me, that I seem calm and peaceful. That's wonderful. It has been a long journey. Yeah.
I see you. I see you. And so when you think about guidance, and let's dive into the imposter syndrome. Okay, let's just dive right in there with guidance, because I don't think it's just to physicians. I most people have imposter syndrome. I was describing it to one of my little mentees yesterday when I was thinking about life like a circle. We all think everybody's inside the circle, but if we would turn around, we're all outside the circle trying to get inside a circle. Mm-hmm. So take that and run with it. What is imposter syndrome, and what have you learned about it, and what would you share with our listeners about how to shift through that?
Yeah. Well, as you say, it's certainly not just physicians. There's all kinds of quotes of celebrities. Jodie Foster thinking that she was an imposter and they should have given the Oscar to Meryl Streep. Michelle Obama talking about feeling like an imposter. So high functioning, not so high functioning, the sense that other people kind of have something that we don't have, whether it's brains, looks, fill in your blank. And it's such a painful process. we become very subjective in our thinking. We start focusing on what we perceive we're not doing well, how we perceive we're not as smart as, pretty as, thin as, again, whatever it is that we're focused on. And then we compare ourselves to others. Well, what are we focused on them? We're focused on what we perceive they are doing well. So we kind of create this mental gap of perception where we believe we are and where they are. And here's the thing about the imposter syndrome. It's just a thought process. It's just a thought process. It's nothing more than a thought process, and an incredibly subjective one. It's not based on objective reality. It's based on these ideas that our mind kind of gravitates to with the negativity bias. And once you begin to realize that it is just a thought process, you can kind of laugh at it. You can kind of say to yourself, oh my gosh, there my crazy mind goes again, accusing me of being an imposter. What's the objective data here? Does it really support the fact that I'm a big phony that's going to be, found out to be the laughing stock of my institution? Or does it actually support that I'm okay? So there's a lot of mindfulness that goes into vanquishing the imposter syndrome, this mindful awareness. What is my mind up to? Is my mind doing something that's helping me? Or is my mind just kind of running with something that is really making me feel lower than low? So that's my biggest pearl. If your listeners take away nothing else, to kind of question their own imposter beliefs, laugh at them a little bit, almost like toss them up in the air and kind of see how silly they are. For every person we're comparing ourselves to and thinking we're an imposter, you can be sure they're comparing themselves to somebody else, and they've got the same thing in their mind, that they're an imposter. It's really kind of silly when we unpack it.
So have you read Byron Katie's work?
I sure have. Yes, she's really such a wise individual.
Gosh, her book's probably been out about 2 decades. Don't you think it's about 20 years old?
Definitely.
Yeah.
But it's still so pertinent. I use her questions all the time in my coaching. The client, has some kind of belief, I'm not doing as well as the other employees. My boss has it out to get me, or, something like that. I'm not a good parent. Byron Katie, is that true? How do you know that's true? What does it make you feel? Who are you when you have that belief? And who would you be without that belief? Kind of give it a test drive in a way, because when we have a lot of these beliefs, we just feel crappy. We feel small, right? We feel unworthy and insignificant. And so we need to question these beliefs and kind of look at them, toss them, look at them from different angles. A lot of them are just our mind being silly, our mind kind of running with something, fanning, a fire of some sort, but it's not necessarily reality. It's just thoughts.
I want to go that first question. There's so many times I've used that question when I start going down this train, and like you said, our mind starts to run away. And is it really true, Michelle? Is it really true that X, Y, Z? Let's take my episode yesterday where I mean, totally transparent, totally just wasn't really expecting her, wasn't looking for her, not used to looking for her. And the deal is I messed up. Okay. Mm-hmm. Is it going to ruin my day? Is it going to ruin my life? All you can do is apologize and let it go. I remember years ago, before I did my work, I would call it where I would chew on it and just almost get it so minute little pieces and spend hour after hour after day after week spinning something. Mm-hmm. And now I spin it for, sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes an hour, but very seldom is it over a day anymore. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably the gift of age, but also the B gift of doing your work. And so once again, Byron Katie's work. Hey, Liz, if you're thinking, would you put her website in the show notes for me? Liz, I thank you for following. Liz is on, and she's always a great supporter of the message, small changes, big shifts. So give me what else can you do? So we got the committee. You got to talk to the committee and kind of get her back in the corner, or him back in the corner, or imposter is what you call it. What are some other ways to for people to be more resilient every day?
Yeah, I talk in the book about my fundamental belief that we all have resilience within us. We all have, in fact, a deep well of strengths and wisdom and steadiness and goodness inside of us. And resilience is about tapping into that well. It's about realizing that the well is there, because sometimes the well can almost be paved over by life circumstances. We don't learn that we have all of these resources within us, and we're always looking outside of ourselves for kind of the wisdom, the next great thing, the relationship that's kind of going to make everything better. And yet it's a resource that we can draw on within us. And it's so important to understand that, to know that you have that, kind of where you started about the regrets and the wishes of the dying. That same wish that I'd stepped out of these societal beliefs and expectations that kind of kept me chained in a way that was not authentic for me. When we look to our resilience well, we see that that goodness is there. We don't have to prove ourselves to the outside world. That goodness is already within us. And I'll be honest, so much of my life's work has been helping vulnerable individuals who are in times of darkness move things from being overwhelming to simply being challenging and manageable. We all face adversity. It's just, it's part of what life is about. We all do. It's just a fact. And yet we can draw upon this inner well of resources to make things more manageable. I think we're really seeing that in the time of the pandemic. We're all in this. We're all struggling in our own way, small, large, and everything in between. And how do we just make this manageable for all of us? How do we grow and learn as opposed to going under?
How do we take off the lid or take out some of the cement that's in our inner well, that's keeping us from being able to feel that connectedness or that resilience?
Yeah. I think it's probably not a one size fits all. Different people do that in different ways. There isn't one cookbook recipe for, do this, this, and this, and you will be resilient. I think it has to do with a number of factors, and I outline them in the book. One, connection, sustaining relationships with people who can support us and see our goodness and our value and believe in us. So incredibly important to see the truth that we have the resilience within us. Perseverance, grit, being motivated to keep going, as you said, on your own journey of kind of healing from difficulties in the past. We have to persevere. That's certainly part of our lives, and we have to figure out how to motivate ourselves to do that. Flexibility. And that's really where mindfulness comes in. I'm going to be like a broken record with that word, but that awareness of our own thought patterns, how we can fixate on things in an inflexible way, and how to work with our own mind, our assumptions, the thoughts that we have, to really kind of see the truth of what our experience is. Self-care and self-compassion, critically important to, again, getting in touch with the resilience, moving some of that inner negative messaging from inner bully, to inner ally, really inner supporter. And positivity, how to notice when we're kind of getting sucked into that vortex of negativity that many of our workplaces can be, and how to kind of bring ourselves back to a more balanced and what is often a more positive viewpoint. Those are just a few of the things.
Well, there is speaking of unpacking, there's so much there to unpack, and none of them sound really hard to me. They sound like they're effort, and it reminds me of a book. Life is. I can't think of the name of it right now. That's why the bad news about going live like this is you have all these resources, but they can't put them to your stuff. But let's go to the book I am listening to right now. I looked at my phone a second ago because I'm listening on Audible to Positive Intelligence. Have you heard of that book yet?
Yeah. Tell me the author. I'm blanking on his name.
Oh, I'd have to look at it here, but and then I don't have glasses over here. Hang on, let me see if I can find it. Well, anyhow, that's going to play it. I don't want to play it. I can't see it on my phone. Positive Intelligence.
Yeah.
But really, it's thinking about it's exactly what you're talking about, how we have basically that good committee. He doesn't use these words, and the saboteur, and we have the people that really help us, the committee that helps us. How do we really access the people, the patterns, the thoughts that are helping us is what you're talking about. And how do we get into that inner will of resilience within inside of us? So,
well, what I would say about that is we realize over time how much agency we have with our own thoughts. In other words, thoughts are just thoughts. They're just mental events. We have a choice about how much attention we give to thoughts, which thoughts we water, which thoughts we kind of grow. And sometimes it's helpful to think about our mind as a garden, because some of us are really kind of attending to the weeds. And we have a choice. We could pick the weeds and kind of put them over in the compost and pay attention to the things that are going well, to our strengths, to things that align with our values and sense of purpose. We have that agency, and we need to develop it even more. But I'm here to say that we can. We really can. And we can kind of become the master of deciding, well, where am I going to put my attention? There's a thought that's telling me I'm an imposter. Sure, I can feed and water that thought, as much as I want, and it'll grow. And I'll feel terrible about myself. Or I can realize that it's just a thought. As I said, just a crazy subjective thought that my mind has latched onto, but I don't have to give it a lot of attention. I can just kind of park it over there in a chair and go on and see the things that I'm doing well, the things that I am contributing to the world that are deeply important to me.
You're saying agency. I'm not sure I've ever heard that word regarding mental health. Dive into that a little bit for me. What do you mean when you say agency?
Some people call it efficacy, this kind of can do. I guess what I mean by agency is choice. We have this option. With awareness, we kind of see what's going on. We see the mental patterns. Imposter syndrome is just such a great example where we're harassing ourselves and feeding ourselves these messages of negativity and poor worth, right? So with agency, we see that we have a choice. Yeah, I can believe it, like I was just saying, or I can move my attention to the things that I am doing well, the strengths, all of the good that I'm doing in the world, all of the good with my kids. That's what the agency is, choice.
Wow. And we have a choice of how we're dealing through this time of uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And I have a little sheet, and some of our listeners know this. I have a little sheet here with pearls. You can't see it. I get the camera right. It's called Pearls. And my guest, Alex McAnderson, we talk about bliss bombs. And one of my bliss bombs or my pearls on my list is, are you okay in this moment? Mm-hmm. So when I start thinking about tomorrow or the next day and the shoulda, coulda, woulda, because I'm a fear-based personality, and most people would not recognize that in me because I have to do a lot to keep my head right. And I don't have to, I want to, I choose to. That's my choice, my agency. I choose to do a lot to keep that right. But are you okay in this moment? Think about, I want to dive into, do you have something you want to say about that before I go to my next question? It's
just a great question. It's a game changer. Am I okay in this moment? My mind is off fear, worrying, what's going to happen? My kids get sick, schools, if I develop this or that disease, am I okay in this moment? 99% of the time, we're actually relatively okay. Maybe not perfect, but we're much more okay than our mind has us thinking we are. It's a great question, Michelle.
Yeah. Are you okay in this moment? Like I said, we're worrying about all the possibilities. All the possibilities. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about physician suicide and this global suicide kind of on the rise right now. And we had a suicide issue before COVID, and we'll have suicide issues after COVID. Talk about physician suicide. It's much higher than people imagine.
We don't know for sure, but the estimates are that 300 to 400 physicians commit suicide every year. So that's 1 to 2 medical school classes of highly trained individuals who've, spent a lot of time investing in their careers. It's unbelievably tragic, unbelievable. And the pressures of being a physician are mighty. They always have been. I think now with technology, with a litigious society, with the emphasis on the bottom line and productivity and all of these administrative tasks that physicians have to do that take them away from their calling of just being and caring for patients, the stakes are even higher. And you may have heard that very tragic suicide in New York City, maybe related to fears about COVID, maybe not. I mean, the motif of the wounded healer is really quite real. A lot of physicians come from troubled backgrounds. I hear about this often with the physicians that I coach. So I don't have a study on that, but the motif of the wounded healer is very real. And then you get into your medical training and you're taught you have to be perfect, all-knowing, captain of the team, certain, ready to act, and there's no certainty, especially with COVID. We don't really know how to treat this horrible disease. And so what happens when a physician's been trained that they always have to have the answer? And there is no answer. And a lot of societal problems, a lot of societal medically induced problems, don't have an answer. So I think it's multifactorial. And I think we want to bring compassion to the healers. They're working incredibly hard, whether it's during COVID, before or after. They deserve a lot of our care and attention,
Okay, I've got like 5 questions. Let me see which one wants to come first. You know, I'm talking to you as a podcast host right now, trying to spread hope and healing. And then all of a sudden I went to my physician, chiropractic wellness self, and thinking about in my own, and I'm not a life or death situation. I don't have to take call in the middle of the night. I'm not doing heart surgery. And I tell my staff that all the time. You should not be losing sleep over this job because we're not doing heart surgery or transplants every day. But I think about the burdens on of being a leader, of being a physician. Say, God, am I making the right decision? Do I need to get more tests? Do I not need to get more tests?
Mhm.
Did I give them enough today? And some days you just don't have anything extra to give. So I use an app called the 5-Minute Journal. Have you heard of the 5-Minute Journal app?
Yes, I have.
What I love about the app is not the gratitude piece. I think that's, I'm a white woman in America. If I'm not grateful, shame on me, right? But the second question I really love is what will make today great? I have found that question, because I've only been using the app about, 8, 9 months. That question right there has transformed my life. What am I going to do today to make it great? I'm going to have a great podcast with Dr. Gail because she took time to be on that. I'm going to have a great phone call with XYZ. Today's my self-care day. The gap between where you're at and self-love is self-care. And so as we think about that, I was unpacking some of those burdens. So here's the question. What would you tell clients or patients that are going to see their physicians? How could they become better partners in health when they go to see their doctors?
That's a great question. Well, frankly, I think you've actually answered it. If you go in to see your doctor and you actually say, I want to partner with you so that I can be the best version of myself physically, mentally, and every way that's important to me. How can we work together? It's a great way, actually, to orient the doctor. Doctors, they're trying to do their best. Some patients want a pill. Some patients want a path to wellness, a holistic path to wellness, but the doctor doesn't always know who that person is. They're kind of making their best guess. So I just love the way you phrase that. Just walk in. It's a partnership. How can we work together? You have your expertise as a physician. I have my lived expertise of being in this body for X number of years. Let's partner together.
I want to throw a couple other things in there. I have a new friend, like a new client, new family member, because for me, it is really a privilege to guide people when they give you a chance to peer into their life and they want your thoughts. I mean, really, it's an awesome responsibility and it's a wonderful gift. But I have this new family member, new client, and she sent me the loveliest note after our first visit. And I would encourage you, if you've been thinking about writing a note to your physician, now's a great time. Now's a great time, whether it's a card or send them your favorite book or something inspirational to you. I would encourage you to write notes to your healthcare providers, whether it's your dentist, whether it's your medical doctor, whether it's your massage therapist, maybe it's your psychotherapist. People really need to feel the hope. And it makes me almost emotional to think about how this person literally took time, wrote me the most thoughtful note I've received. And I'm blessed. I receive a lot of notes, but it was so thoughtful. And it was words that she knew I would appreciate. And so,
Michelle, it's particularly important in the time of COVID because so many physicians have told me, with all the PPE that I have to wear, the mask, the shield, the headgear, everything, I can't really connect to my patients in the same way. And it's really hard for me to go through my day not really connecting, not getting that fuel back, that sense of, wow, I helped this human being. So we're all in this with the masks. We're all struggling with it. But I really want to echo what you said. This is it's really a time for all of us to deepen our connections, whether it's with our healthcare provider, with our loved ones, with our kids, with, somebody we pass on the street. It's not good that we all have to be, kind of cloistered under our mask. And the more we can just say hi or do something with our eyes that somebody can see and really go out of our way to connect, I think it's vitally important.
Yeah, there's just, I think about, I'm a hugger. And I've not been able to hug. I have to come clean. I've given 1 or 2 hugs a day lately because I have people that have lost family members or they lost their job, or quite frankly, they just needed it. And I was like, you know what? This is one of my hugs today. pay.
We can all do virtual hugs. We're all doing that now. Hey, let me give you a hug. Yeah, there's other ways to show our love and be safe.
Yeah, maybe it's to, we have a great baker in it's called Little Buddies. My assistant Emily has found that baking through COVID is one of her joys. So I don't encourage her to bring in gluten-free, dairy-free cookies every day, but she does it about once a week. The staff's like so happy. I'm like, don't bring those this week. I'm realigning my nutrition this week. So I'm curious, what are you reading right now? What are you plugging into to fill your?
Well, you can hear I'm a big fan of mindfulness, and I typically have one or two mindfulness books at my bedside. There's a book by Jack Kornfield. It's not new. It's called Wise Heart. It's a lovely compendium of Buddhism and mindfulness, and it's very accessible and readable. So I read that at times. Tara Brach has a great new book, Radical Compassion. That one is on my bedside. I've been kind of chipping away at that. She's such a wise soul. So those are two that come to mind. There's so many good books out there. Really, no shortage of them.
I just reached over. I have like 10 on my desk. I just got a new one. Not that I need another book. My partner's a therapist. When a book came in the mail, I was like, holy moly, you do not need another book, especially because I have Audible and all this. But I just got Radical Forgiveness. Can you see it?
I haven't seen that. No, who's the author, Michelle?
The author is Colin Tipping. I just got it. I haven't even opened it, but one of my clients was telling me about it, and it was like, whoa, I need that book. And I think about this time, how do we forgive ourselves so that we can turn around and forgive others? But I think it starts here in self-compassion, which you've kind of have peeked into a little bit today. So I love hearing about what you're reading. I'm in the heartland. I call this the heartland, and I feel like we're going to help heal this planet from the ripples from the heart of America, right in Kansas City, so out to the east and west, and to the north and south. And my friends at Blue Cross Blue Shield recently launched a movement called Mindful. Mindful Blue, and it's about mental health. And we realized that they were having people that could not get into providers, and then now within 4 hours you get an answer back, which I'm so grateful. So thank you to our friends over at Blue Cross Blue Shield for the work they're doing with Mindful Blue. That's pretty darn awesome.
Wonderful. It's good to hear about, Michelle.
Yeah. So we're on this side. By the way, have you met my friend Hillary Illick in Boston? Does that name ring a bell? She's one of your friends. She's got to be one of your friends.
Sorry, don't know that name. There's a lot of us physicians, and there's a lot of people in Boston. Who is she?
Well, she actually is a Hoffman teacher where I did when I was 31, where I did my healing journey. But you're going to love her. I'm going to connect you with her. You guys will become fast friends. What other advice would you like to share before we start to wrap up? We've celebrated you. You've given us some wonderful guidance. You've given us some tools like Jack Kornfield's book. We've got Tara Brach with her Radical Compassion. And then my new favorite book that I haven't started yet. Actually, I like the Positive Intelligence. That's also really good. Radical Forgiveness. You got to put the good stuff in. For me, the more good stuff I put in, I get to push away that negative committee that likes to tell me the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. It's kind of like within your diet. If you don't want to give up gluten or dairy, add more vegetables. You will not go wrong by adding more vegetables. So what have I left off that you really feel compelled to share today?
Well, I think one of the most powerful medicinals out there is self-compassion. It is. We are all so harsh on ourselves. The negativity bias just pervades our beings. And we have this myth about perfectionism. Perfectionism in the things we write, perfectionism as a parent, perfectionism in all kinds of decisions. And it just drives us nuts, drives us in circles of kind of never good enough. So I think my main advice is at least once a day, hand over heart. And remind yourself, I'm good. I'm doing good. I have a lot of strengths. I'm an attractive person. I'm a worthy human being, whatever the messages are that you need to kind of reparent almost, because so many of us are wounded from the past. So how to be compassionate. I mean, I'm a physician. I have a lot of expertise in pharmacology. I think self-compassion is the most powerful medicinal going.
We actually could end the show right there, but I don't want to because I'm having so much fun talking to you. How do we build that? And I loved how you put your hand over your heart. And in my book, if you send me a note, and whoever's following this, I know somebody on my team's doing this. Let's give away small changes, big shifts. Put the odds in your favor, and we have a whole chapter in there. A whole chapter is like 2 pages, so you don't think you have to read a big book on self-compassion. And part of it is putting your hand over your heart and make your bliss bombs or your pearls, whatever. I'm reading another one is, what good do you see? That's one of my pearls. What good do I see happening in the world? How about what good do I see in me? So I'm going to add that to my pearl here, because I'm a critic on myself. I have to tell you, I beat myself up, but I listen to podcasts, I read books, I listen to books, I listen to music. I have great conversations with people like you that kicks me in the butt and says, get back on the right track. So what else would you like to share? Anything else come to mind? Self-compassion. How can people find you? Plug into your message.
You can go to my website, gailgazelle.com. I'm on Facebook, Gail Birnbaum Gazelle. You can download a free chapter of my book on my website, and love to hear from you.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. It's coming up here in just a second. You know, I've got about 4 more questions as we continue to wrap up. And I've never asked this question to anybody in the 7 years I've been doing a podcast, but it's coming to me and it keeps coming.
Okay, drum roll, Michelle.
So if you could go back and talk to your younger self, what would you tell her?
Oh, yeah. Well, I actually spend a lot of time with my younger self, my inner child, so wounded from an abusive childhood and felt so unworthy and frankly unlovable. So I spent a lot of time with her. That's been a big part of my healing journey and my own resilience journey. And I really tell her she's good. She wasn't to blame, wasn't her fault. A lot of it was out of her control, and that she's wonderful and I love her. So that's my practice.
Yeah, you've got this. I'd say you've got this, sister. Just keep on walking. When you're in hell, keep on moving. Yeah. What would you tell parents? Because if I personally don't have any biological children, I have many non-biological. But if there's a parent at home right now that has this 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, or 10-year-old, or 15-year-old, and they're questioning what they're doing, what wisdom would you share with them? Especially during these times, to nurture their child, to help them?
Well, I think one of the biggest gifts a parent can give a young child in particular is unconditional love. So that's kind of obvious, but what does that really mean? It means kind of stepping out of your own story. The child does something and you feel wounded or hurt or unseen or disrespected. My son is 23, and I know I certainly felt that a lot when he was a teenager. He doesn't love me. He doesn't see how hard I'm working. And it's just so important to take care of ourselves so that we don't burden our children with all of that stuff that's really us, because then they don't really get to be seen for who they are. They get to be seen as who we think they are and what we're projecting onto them. So I think that's important counsel for parents, is to take the time to take care of yourself, to make sure you're not running on empty, so that you don't kind of put it forward onto your child, so to speak, project it in a way onto your child. Take care of yourself so that you're nurtured, so that you can really be present and whole for this lovely young human being who happens to be your daughter or son.
Well, it goes back to that self-compassion. I want to give a plug, like I just can't help but give a plug to the Hoffman Institute. It's where I did my process 31 years ago. And I love what they're doing right now with, they have a 2-day virtual weekend. And I just had a friend that went through it, for my first friend that went through it. And she had the same feelings afterwards that I had after 8 days. And I felt like I had 10 years of therapy in 8 days. So we'll put that in the show notes, the Hoffman Essentials program. I'd encourage you. It's a great investment if you're wondering what you can do to help yourself, and it'll help you get rid of some of the monkey mind and clean out the cupboards. And you can do it right from your own home and not have to be in another place. So Gail, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. And any other little things stirring that you feel like you want to share before I go to my last 2 standard questions?
We've covered a lot of ground, Michelle. So I think I'm good right now. Thank you.
Well, great. Our listeners could follow you at gailgazelle.com. There it is right there. And so the last 2 questions, which are pretty common. that I like to share. If you had a magic wand and you could change the world, what would you do?
A tall order. I would make sure that mindfulness was included in kindergarten, first grade, second grade. And it was just part of the norm, just like kids learn to spell and their multiplication tables, that they would actually learn how to meditate and settle themselves and see the good within themselves. That's what I would do with my magic wand. The Dalai Lama says that, if every kid learned to meditate, we wouldn't have war in the next generation. I think it's really true, because we build that muscle of compassion, not just for ourselves, but really we can quiet all those voices of fear and negativity that get in the way of seeing the good in our fellow human beings.
Yeah. My friend Wendy's teacher said to her, when you're aware, you're halfway there.
Mm,
And that's part of that, just kind of dialing it back a minute.
that's right.
And even I just took my voice down a little bit, thinking about, okay, how can I be more mindful and intentional in this moment? So I love that. I love that you brought that up. And we're on a mission with, I have a foundation called Big Shifts, bigshifts.org, and it's to make generational change for 5 to 30-year-olds through whole person health. So how do we help these kids realize that it is a whole picture? It's not just what you eat. It's not just about exercise. It's not just about your therapist and mindfulness. It's about the whole picture. It's about what you're around. It's about how addicted you are to this device. It's about the EMFs. There's just so many little things you can do, the small changes that can really create big shifts. And that's what we're doing with the bigshifts.com. So bigshifts.org foundation. All right. Last question. And then I got a quote I specifically picked out for you. Hang on. I got 2 more questions. I know your medicine. Your medicine is hope and healing. Yes. I know that one. So what's a quote? What's some words that inspire you?
Well, I'm going to go back to the Dalai Lama again. If you want to be unhappy, think about yourself. If you want to be happy, think about others. I find that very, very orienting in my day-to-day life. We all get so caught up thinking in our small ways about ourselves and what's going to happen. Are we going to be okay? Are we going to be successful? And the world is so much bigger than that.
All right. That is a good assignment. So for those of you listening today, I would encourage you to think about, what is your medicine? What could you do today to share goodness with the world? And start to sprinkle that, sprinkle it out there. I remember an interview I did with the doctor out of Minnesota. Sorry, my brain is not going to think of his name at the moment, out of, what's that place in Mayo Clinic. And he really talked about, he'd walk down the halls and he would, instead of looking at his phone like this, he would say, good morning. And even if people didn't say good morning to him, he may even say just good morning with his eyes or with his heart. And he was extremely mindful. And he was just a fabulous show. We should put that in the show link. I think my team, Lauren's helping on the back end today. I want to give a shout out to my team. I want to be mindful of all the hard work you do to keep up with me. And I'm so grateful. So to Lauren and Zach and Emily, and then my team at YWC, thank you for all the effort. So I hope that you got something great out of the show today. I know I sure had a great conversation with Dr. Gail. Love your vibe. And I've got a saying on my wall over here in my office that your vibe attracts your tribe. Your vibe attracts your tribe. And I got a chance to, when I was meditating this morning, because I did take some time to meditate this morning, and I actually looked at those pictures and thinking about how many wonderful people have been in my life. And those of you that are sharing with me today on this, thank you for helping us spread the message of good, of hope and healing. I know that I got a lot out of today. And if you got one nugget out of it, I'd love for you to share it in the comment section. And join us. This will be on the podcast next week. But join us next week. I have to tell you, I have no idea who the guest is because I can't remember today. So sometimes there's just days where you don't remember, and that's okay. I'm in the moment. So here's mine. And it's by Annie Lamott. And I think you'll recognize this quote. My mind is like a dangerous neighborhood. I try not to go there alone. By Annie Lamott. All right. Hey, have a great day. Blessings to all of you. We'll chat. I sure appreciate you listening to Small Changes, Big Shifts. If you go to the website, smallchangesbigshifts.com, we'll have the show notes ready for you there. If this episode inspired you to make a small change that will lead to a big shift, please share with a friend. You can catch our episode on Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and our website. And if you feel like it, please leave a rating or a comment. Be sure to subscribe so you can catch our episode next week. Blessings to you.